The small house on Jackson Street in Gary, Indiana barely contained the sound. 9 children, 1 bathroom, and a father whose dreams were bigger than the walls that held them. Joseph Jackson wasn't a gentle man. He was a steel worker by day, a frustrated musician by night, and a drill sergeant to his children every moment in between. When he saw talent in his sons, he didn't nurture it with kindness. He forged it with fear. Michael Joseph Jackson was born on August 29, 1958, the 7th child in a family where standing out meant survival. While other kids played outside, the Jackson brothers rehearsed. While friends rode bikes and climbed trees, Michael practiced dance steps until his feet bled. His father watched with a leather belt in hand, ready to strike at the first mistake. "You mess up, you pay," Joseph would say. And they did. The price was their childhood. But Michael was different from his brothers. When he opened his mouth to sing, something magical happened. The voice that came out didn't belong to a boy. It belonged to someone who had lived 1,000 lives, who had felt every shade of pain and joy. At 5 years old, he could make grown people cry. At 6, he was leading the Jackson 5 with a confidence that seemed impossible. His brothers were talented, but Michael was touched by something beyond talent. He was possessed by it. The family moved from Gary to California, chasing the dream that Joseph had planted in their souls. Motown Records signed them, and suddenly the Jackson boys were stars. But stardom for a child is a strange, twisted thing. Michael watched other children from limousines and hotel windows. He saw them laughing, playing, being careless in ways he never could. Every interview, every performance, every smile for the camera was work. There was no room for being a kid. Berry Gordy, the founder of Motown, saw the gold mine in Michael's voice and presence. The Jackson 5 exploded onto the charts with "I Want You Back," and Michael became America's sweetheart. He was cute, talented, and impossibly polished. But behind the afro and the bright smile was a boy who was terrified of his father, exhausted from performing, and desperately lonely. He collected mannequins in his room because they were the only friends who didn't want anything from him. They didn't judge. They didn't demand. They just existed alongside him in silence. The hits kept coming. ABC, "The Love You Save," "I'll Be There." Each song climbed higher than the last. Michael's voice hadn't even changed yet, and he was already a veteran performer. He studied James Brown's every move, watched Fred Astaire until he could mimic every step, and absorbed Diana Ross's grace like a sponge. He wasn't just performing. He was building something inside himself, piece by piece, creating an armor made of dance moves and vocal runs. But the armor couldn't protect him from everything. As his body began to change, so did his relationship with his appearance. His father mocked his nose, called him ugly, made jokes that cut deeper than any belt ever could. Michael would stare in the mirror for hours, hating what he saw, wishing he could be anyone else. The boy who made millions love him couldn't love himself. The Jackson 5 performed on every major stage in America. They met presidents and celebrities. They had screaming fans and #1 records. From the outside, it looked like a fairy tale. From the inside, it felt like a beautiful prison. Michael was trapped between being a product and being a person, and he didn't know which one he was supposed to be. The only thing he knew for certain was that the stage was the one place where everything made sense. When the music played and the lights hit him, he wasn't Michael Jackson the scared boy. He was something bigger, something untouchable. He was becoming the performer who would change the world, but the cost of that transformation was a childhood he would spend his entire life trying to reclaim. The young man staring back from the mirror in 1979 wasn't the child star anymore. Michael Jackson was 21 years old, and he was suffocating. The Jackson 5 had become the Jacksons after leaving Motown, but Michael felt like he was still singing someone else's songs, living someone else's vision. His father still controlled the money, the decisions, the direction. Every success felt like it belonged to the family, not to him. He needed to break free, but freedom terrified him almost as much as staying trapped. Enter Quincy Jones. The legendary producer saw something in Michael that nobody else fully understood. He saw an artist who could transcend race, genre, and generation. When they worked together on Off the Wall in 1979, something clicked. This wasn't Michael the child star. This was Michael the artist, the visionary, the perfectionist who would spend days on a single vocal ad-lib until it felt right. The album was pure magic, blending disco, soul, funk, and pop into something that felt effortless and fresh. Don't Stop Till You Get Enough and Rock With You weren't just hits. They were declarations of independence. But even massive success wasn't enough. Michael watched the Grammy Awards give Off the Wall only one trophy, and something inside him hardened. He had sold millions of albums, dominated the charts, and proven himself as a solo artist, but the industry still saw him as a former child star. The disrespect burned. He wrote in his journal that night, "I will not be ignored. I will make an album that cannot be denied." That album would be Thriller. The creation of Thriller was an obsession. Michael worked with Quincy Jones like two mad scientists in a laboratory, crafting each song with surgical precision. He wanted every track to be a potential single, every moment to be perfect. Billie Jean was recorded dozens of times because the bass line didn't feel right. Michael danced in the studio while recording to capture the energy in his voice. He wasn't just making music. He was building a weapon to conquer the world. When Thriller dropped in November 1982, the world wasn't ready. The Girl Is Mine with Paul McCartney was the safe first single, a duet that showed Michael could stand alongside rock royalty. But Billie Jean was the nuclear bomb. The bass line was hypnotic, the lyrics mysterious, and Michael's performance was pure electricity. MTV had barely played black artists before, but they couldn't ignore Billie Jean. The video showed Michael in a pink shirt, black pants, and white socks, walking on squares that lit up beneath his feet. Every move was calculated, every step was perfection. And then came the moonwalk. The Motown 25 television special on March 25, 1983, changed everything. Michael performed Billie Jean wearing a black sequin jacket, a white glove, and confidence that radiated through the screen. When he glided backward across the stage in that moonwalk, time stopped. 50 million people watched him defy gravity and logic. The next day, the world woke up different. Michael Jackson wasn't just a star. He was a phenomenon, a force of nature, a cultural earthquake. Thriller kept climbing. Beat It brought Eddie Van Halen's guitar into the mix, bridging rock and pop in a way that broke down walls. The video showed Michael stopping a gang fight with darts, turning violence into art. Then came the Thriller video itself, directed by John Landis. It wasn't a video. It was a 40-minute short film with zombies, choreography, and a transformation that showed Michael wasn't afraid to explore darkness. Vincent Price's haunting voiceover added theater to pop music. MTV played it constantly. The album sold 1 million copies a week at its peak. Michael became the biggest star on the planet. He won 8 Grammy Awards in one night, a record that stood for decades. Thriller became the best-selling album of all time. But success at this level came with a price. Michael could barely leave his house without being mobbed. His face was on every magazine, every news broadcast, every conversation. The world wanted to own him, to consume him, to know everything about him. And the more famous he became, the more he retreated into himself. He built Neverland Ranch as his sanctuary, a place where he could finally have the childhood he lost. There were amusement park rides, a zoo, a movie theater, and no adults telling him what to do. He invited sick children to visit, wanting to give them joy the way he wished someone had given him joy. But even paradise couldn't protect him from what was coming. The higher he climbed, the harder the fall would be, and Michael Jackson was standing at the very top of the world with nowhere to go but down. The face looking back from the mirror was changing, and Michael knew the world was watching. Every magazine, every tabloid, every news report seemed obsessed with his appearance. His skin was getting lighter. His nose was getting smaller. His face was transforming into something that people couldn't quite understand, and the whispers grew louder with each passing year. Michael claimed he had vitiligo, a skin condition that destroyed pigmentation. The press called him a liar. Doctors later confirmed the disease, but by then, the damage to his reputation was done. The truth didn't matter as much as the story people wanted to tell. But physical transformation was only part of what was happening. Michael's artistic ambitions were growing beyond what anyone could comprehend. Bad, released in 1987, had to follow Thriller, and that was an impossible task. How do you top perfection? You don't. You create something different. Bad was darker, edgier, more aggressive. The title track showed Michael in leather and buckles, trying to project toughness that never quite suited him. But the album was brilliant. Man in the Mirror, Smooth Criminal, The Way You Make Me Feel proved he wasn't a one-album wonder. He was an artist who could reinvent himself and still dominate. The Bad World Tour was spectacular and exhausting. Michael performed 123 shows across the globe, playing to millions of fans who screamed his name like a prayer. But backstage, the loneliness was crushing. He was surrounded by people but connected to no one. His family relationships were strained. His father was a shadow that still haunted him, even as Michael claimed control of his own career. His brothers wanted him to tour with them, but Michael had outgrown the Jacksons. He was orbiting in a different stratosphere, and they couldn't follow. The tabloids became Michael's greatest enemy. They called him Wacko Jacko, a nickname he despised. They wrote stories about him sleeping in a hyperbaric chamber to live longer, about him trying to buy the Elephant Man's bones, about him being bizarre and disconnected from reality. Some stories were exaggerations. Some were complete fabrications. But they all fed the narrative that Michael Jackson was no longer normal, that fame had twisted him into something strange and alien. And the more he defended himself, the crazier he seemed. Michael responded the only way he knew how, through his art. Dangerous, released in 1991, was a sonic explosion. He worked with new producer Teddy Riley, embracing new jack swing and hip-hop influences. Black or White tackled racial harmony with revolutionary morphing effects in the video. Remember the Time was an Egyptian fantasy starring Eddie Murphy and Magic Johnson. In the Closet was overtly sexual, showing a side of Michael that made people uncomfortable because it challenged their image of him as an eternal child. But during the Dangerous tour, everything fell apart. In 1993, a 13-year-old boy named Jordan Chandler accused Michael of sexual abuse. The accusation hit like a bomb. Michael's world, so carefully constructed and controlled, shattered in an instant. He cancelled the tour, went into hiding, and became addicted to painkillers as his mental state deteriorated. The investigation was brutal. His home was raided. His body was photographed for evidence. The man who was once the most beloved entertainer on earth became the most suspected. Michael settled the civil case for over $20 million, a decision that haunted him forever. His lawyers advised it. His insurance company pushed for it. But to the public, settling meant guilt. Innocent people don't pay, they said. Michael maintained his innocence, insisted the family was extorting him, claimed that fighting in court would drag on for years and destroy him completely. But the damage was irreversible. Parents who once let their children idolize him now looked at him with suspicion. Radio stations questioned whether to play his music. The King of Pop's throne was cracking. He married Lisa Marie Presley, Elvis's daughter, in 1994. People called it a publicity stunt. She insisted it was real. They divorced 2 years later, and Michael married again, this time to Debbie Rowe, a nurse who gave him 2 children, Prince and Paris. The marriages felt transactional to outsiders, but to Michael, they were attempts to build a normal life, to have a family that loved him unconditionally. He wanted children desperately because he saw in them the innocence he had lost. They were pure, uncorrupted by fame and cruelty. History, released in 1995, was Michael's angry response to the world. The album was part greatest hits, part new material that addressed the accusations directly. They Don't Care About Us spoke to persecution. Scream, a duet with his sister Janet, was a primal scream of frustration against media invasion. The video cost $7 million, the most expensive ever made, showing Michael and Janet in a futuristic spaceship, isolated from the world that tormented them. The statue of Michael on the History album cover towered over buildings, an attempt to reclaim godhood even as the earth crumbled beneath him. Michael Jackson was no longer just a man or an artist. He was a symbol of both incredible achievement and tragic downfall, and nobody, not even Michael himself, knew how the story would end. The new millennium should have been Michael's renaissance. Invincible, released in 2001, had the biggest budget ever for an album at that time. Michael poured his soul into every track, demanded perfection from every collaborator, and believed this would be his triumphant return. But the music industry had changed. Pop stars like Britney Spears and NSYNC dominated the landscape. Hip-hop was taking over. And Michael Jackson, once untouchable, suddenly seemed like a relic from another era. Invincible sold millions but was considered a commercial disappointment. For anyone else, it would have been a massive success. For Michael, it felt like failure. His relationship with Sony Music became toxic. Michael appeared at protests, calling the label's chairman a racist, accusing the company of sabotaging his album. He held up signs that said Sony kills music. The public spectacle was uncomfortable to watch. This wasn't the smooth, controlled Michael who had conquered the world. This was someone unraveling, someone whose grip on reality seemed to be slipping. His appearance had changed so dramatically that people barely recognized him. The surgeries had gone too far. His nose was collapsing. His skin was almost translucent. He looked fragile, broken, like a porcelain doll on the verge of shattering. Then came the documentary. In 2003, British journalist Martin Bashir spent months with Michael for Living with Michael Jackson. Michael thought it would rehabilitate his image, show the world his humanity and kindness. Instead, Bashir's documentary became a weapon. It showed Michael holding hands with children, letting them sleep in his room, behaving in ways that seemed inappropriate to millions of viewers. One boy, Gavin Avizo, appeared in the documentary with Michael. When the film aired, it caused an uproar. Within weeks, Avizo's family accused Michael of molestation. The arrest was humiliating. Police handcuffed Michael Jackson, the man who had performed for presidents and queens, and took him to jail. His mugshot showed hollow eyes and defeat. The trial began in 2005, and for months, the media circus consumed everything. Every day brought new accusations, new witnesses, new details that painted Michael as either a predator or a victim of extortion. The prosecution argued he used his fame to groom children. The defense argued the family had a history of fraud and saw Michael as a cash opportunity. Michael attended court in pajamas one day because he was late after a hospital visit for back pain. The image was pathetic and sad. This icon, this genius, this performer who had commanded stages like a god, now shuffled into a courtroom looking like a ghost. His brothers attended to support him. His fans held vigils outside, insisting on his innocence. But inside that courtroom, Michael was alone in a way that transcended physical presence. He was fighting for his freedom, his legacy, and his life. The testimony was brutal. Former employees described strange behavior. The accuser's mother claimed Michael held her family captive. But under cross-examination, stories fell apart. The family's credibility crumbled. They had demanded money from celebrities before. They had lied under oath in previous cases. The prosecution's case was weak, built on character assassination rather than solid evidence. Still, the trial destroyed what was left of Michael's reputation. Even if he was acquitted, the damage was permanent. On June 13, 2005, the verdict came down. Not guilty on all 14 counts. Michael wept. His family wept. His fans celebrated outside the courthouse. But the victory was hollow. Michael had won the legal battle but lost everything else. His health was broken. His finances were in ruins from legal fees and settlements. His spirit was crushed. He left America shortly after the trial, moving to Bahrain as a guest of the royal family, unable to face the country that had first loved him and then destroyed him. 4 years, Michael drifted. He made appearances in Tokyo, in London, in Las Vegas, but they were shadows of his former glory. He wore surgical masks and bizarre disguises. He struggled financially, facing foreclosure on Neverland Ranch, the paradise he had built now rotting and abandoned. He talked about comebacks that never materialized. He recorded songs that never got released. The world had moved on, but Michael was trapped in the past, trying to recapture magic that had evaporated. His children became his only joy. Prince, Paris, and Blanket were shielded from the world, their faces covered in public, their lives kept as normal as possible given their circumstances. Michael was a devoted father, reading to them, teaching them, protecting them from the fame that had destroyed him. He wanted them to have what he never did, a childhood. But providing that required money, and money required performing, and performing required a strength Michael wasn't sure he had left. In 2009, a promoter approached him with an offer. 50 concerts at London's O2 Arena, a residency that would solve his financial problems and remind the world of his genius. Michael agreed, not because he wanted to, but because he had to. This Is It would be his final curtain call, a greatest hits spectacular that would prove Michael Jackson still had the magic. Rehearsals began, and for brief moments, the old Michael appeared. His voice still soared. His moves still mesmerized. But his body was failing. He was taking pills to sleep, pills to wake up, pills to perform, pills to survive. And behind closed doors, everyone worried. Everyone knew something terrible was coming. They just didn't know it would happen so soon. June 25, 2009, started like any other day of rehearsal. Michael was tired, always tired, but determined to make This Is It perfect. He had been working with Dr. Conrad Murray, his personal physician, who administered powerful drugs to help him sleep. Michael struggled with insomnia for years, haunted by anxiety, pain, and memories he couldn't escape. That afternoon, Michael returned home to his rented mansion in Holmby Hills, Los Angeles. He needed rest. He needed to sleep. He needed relief from the pressure of 50 sold-out shows waiting for him in London. Dr. Murray gave Michael propofol, a hospital-grade anesthetic never meant for home use, certainly never meant for sleep. It was dangerous, reckless, unthinkable. But Michael demanded it. He called it his milk because of its white color. It was the only thing that gave him the deep sleep his tortured mind craved. Murray administered the drug and left Michael alone. He made phone calls, sent text messages, was distracted and negligent. When he finally checked on his patient, Michael Jackson wasn't breathing. Paramedics arrived at 12:21 p.m. They found Michael on his bed, not breathing, no pulse. Murray claimed he had just discovered him. The timeline didn't add up. CPR was performed, but it was too late. Michael was rushed to UCLA Medical Center, but it was merely a formality. At 2:26 p.m., doctors pronounced him dead. He was 50 years old. The king of pop was gone. The news spread like wildfire across the internet. Twitter crashed from the volume of tweets. News channels interrupted regular programming. Around the world, people stopped what they were doing. They couldn't believe it. Michael Jackson was supposed to be invincible. He had survived so much, the abuse, the accusations, the trials, the tabloids. He was supposed to make the comeback. He was supposed to prove everyone wrong one final time. Instead, he died alone in a bedroom, killed by the very thing meant to bring him peace. The memorial service at the Staples Center in Los Angeles 11 days later was watched by billions worldwide. His golden casket sat center stage, surrounded by flowers and grief. His daughter Paris, just 11 years old, spoke through tears. "Ever since I was born, Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine," she said, her voice breaking. "I just want to say I love him so much." The moment shattered hearts globally. This child, raised behind veils and masks to protect her from the world, was now exposed in her rawest moment of pain. Usher sang "Gone Too Soon." Stevie Wonder performed "Never Dreamed You'd Leave in Summer." Jermaine Jackson sang "Smile," the song Michael loved because Charlie Chaplin wrote it, another performer who knew the cost of fame. Magic Johnson spoke. Berry Gordy spoke. Brooke Shields spoke about the gentle, funny friend nobody saw. And through it all, Michael's music played, reminding everyone of the incredible gift he had given the world, the joy he had created even as he suffered. The investigation into Michael's death revealed the full horror. Dr. Conrad Murray was charged with involuntary manslaughter. The trial showed shocking negligence. Murray gave Michael a fatal dose of propofol, left him unattended, delayed calling 911, lied to paramedics and police. He was convicted and served 2 years in prison, a sentence that felt pathetically inadequate for ending a life so significant. Michael's family believed it was murder, that others were involved, that the truth was darker than anyone admitted. But the legal system had spoken. Michael was gone, and no verdict would bring him back. In death, Michael Jackson achieved something he could never achieve in life: redemption. The accusations faded into background noise. The bizarre behavior was contextualized as trauma response. The physical transformation was understood as disease and dysmorphia. What remained was the music, the dancing, the artistry that had influenced every performer who came after him. Justin Timberlake, Usher, Chris Brown, Bruno Mars, The Weeknd all carried pieces of Michael in their work. He had invented modern pop performance, the fusion of singing, dancing, and visual storytelling that defined an era. Thriller returned to the top of the charts after his death. His music videos were watched hundreds of millions of times by new generations discovering his genius. The moonwalk became eternal. The sequin glove became iconic. Billie Jean, Beat It, Man in the Mirror, Black or White, these songs transcended time, becoming anthems that would outlive everyone who first heard them. Michael had wanted to be immortal, and through his art, he achieved it. But the tragedy lingered. Michael Jackson never got to be normal. He never got the childhood he craved. He never found the peace he desperately sought. He was exploited by his father, consumed by his fame, betrayed by people he trusted, and destroyed by a world that built him up just to tear him down. He gave everything to his art and paid for it with his humanity. He wanted to heal the world through music but couldn't heal himself. Neverland Ranch stands abandoned now, a monument to dreams that turned into nightmares. The amusement rides don't spin. The zoo is empty. The laughter of children who once visited has faded into silence. It's a perfect metaphor for Michael's life, a place of joy built by someone who never found joy, a paradise created by someone trapped in hell. Michael's children grew up without him. Prince became a young man who produces films. Paris became a model and actress who speaks openly about mental health and the pain of losing her father. Blanket, now going by Bye Guy, stays out of the spotlight, guarding his privacy. They carry Michael's legacy but are free from his burden. He protected them from fame, even if he couldn't protect himself. The final truth about Michael Jackson is this: he was human. Deeply flawed, incredibly talented, profoundly damaged, and extraordinarily generous. He was a little boy who never got to grow up normally and a man who never learned how to live without performance. He was accused of terrible things and acquitted of all charges. He was loved by millions and understood by no one. He changed music forever and paid the ultimate price for his genius. He was Michael Joseph Jackson, the man behind the King of Pop, and his story is both a triumph and a tragedy so profound that the world is still trying to understand what it witnessed. His music plays on, eternal and untouchable, the only part of him that was truly invincible.